It's interesting, Nazry, if you could, I mean, you're an expert, you've commentated quite a bit on intercultural dynamics, right? I mean, here, if it's an issue of clash of civilizations, clash of martyrdom, clash of, but it's a clash, obviously we are seeing a clash, and it's gaining momentum, and it's not just limited to France. That's my point.
Yes.
There is
It's broader.
Broader.
Yeah.
So if you say it's isolated in France, I think we can understand. But it's now gone. It's become a European reflex, so to speak. What's your take on that?
Right. So first, I think we have to look at the idea of free speech in a very nuanced, measured manner. I think free speech, and in this sense, Charlie Hebdo was trying to pass it off as satire. Yes, France has a very long tradition of satire, starting back from Voltaire, who wrote Candide, which is a very satirical sign. But we must not forget that the idea of satire is actually a literary phenomenon, right? So by that I mean that it has to, it is not blatant, it is not out there, it's not an insult, and that's what the Pope was getting at, that if you insult my mother, I'll punch you in your nose, right? And the idea of satire itself is also quite strong in the Muslim world. It has a long tradition, starting from the Arabian Nights, basically, a satire against the monarchy, right? But as well as what's happening today in the contemporary Arab world, where we have the John Stewart of Egypt, Bassem Youssef, who runs a YouTube channel satirizing post-Arab Spring, right? And so this idea of free speech and satire itself is not something that is, a European phenomenon or a Muslim phenomenon. I think it's a phenomenon that all countries are interested in. And like the minister said, it is the kind of extent to which you draw the line. But I think what we really need to consider is that on all occasions, if we consider it a literary phenomenon and we understand that perspective, then we must understand that whatever is blatant out there is an insult. And we also must take into account the idea of power relations here. And by that I mean when a more powerful group speak out against a less powerful group, that can be considered bullying, right? Yes. This happens in school as well, the bigger boy bullying the small boy.
Now, so if you are clearly a minority community and you've had not a very comfortable life in a particular society, and this actually happens, say for example in France, now clearly from what you're saying, it is not unexpected or not unreasonable, unnatural for the Muslim community, for example, in France, which is a minority, to react. And that's really what's happening. Now, that brings me to the question of the need for laws within each society to regulate behavior to some extent. Now, specifically, I'm talking about anti-blasphemy laws, right? What is interesting is almost all European countries, with the exception of Ireland, I believe, and in North America, Canada, until today, they have not abolished the blasphemy laws. All the others have abolished systematically blasphemy legislation. So I'm wondering whether there's any form of legal recourse that people who feel that they have been insulted, their religion has been insulted, have in European countries. Minister.
Is there is there an ability in Europe for people who feel insulted to sue? I think by and large the European approach has been, and in many other countries also, that look, you need to be able to laugh it off. But I think increasingly we have to take note. Our own approach has been, no, you don't expect people to laugh it off. You can propagate your own religion, you can talk about your own race, but you cannot insult someone else. That's been our approach.
Yeah.
I think all I can say to you and as regards Europe is, I think they are finding their way. There are different levels of legislation. And in Canada the debate is going on. You have the debate in Malaysia with the Sedition Act. So it's not actually restricted to Europe.
Can we?
Right. With the tightest of laws, but without a social environment where things can be worked out, tolerated, or even frankly discussed and so on, the laws would be not very effective. But just to tie up with the earlier points, there is a disconnect between the kind of secularist thinking and as you rightly highlighted, the reality of religious life and religiosity amongst many people in the world. And this is where the question of power comes in. The world of the Parisian intelligentsia and the world of the immigrant in the poorest of neighborhoods, they are quite different worlds.
Yep.
And then coming back to Minister's point, then the question of at the heart of the blasphemy idea is the idea of the incitement to hatred, right? And how that plays out, especially in groups which are relatively less powerful. Not to talk about marginalized, alienated, discriminated, and so on.
At least it's quite apparent to us that the United States is distancing itself somewhat from this entire European, tsunami, and the fact that President Obama did not go, and the ambassador to France represented him, is not something that we can ignore, right? And President Obama actually made a statement. I mean, he said they will provide France with every bit of assistance in fighting what happened, fighting terrorism. But he also added, when some people see these kinds of terrorists, they conflate them with other Muslims. The point that you made, they're Muslims and they're Muslims, And it's the extreme right that's going to benefit from this. This move is the extreme right. So the point that's being made, and I believe that President Obama is coming from a very different experience, because he's had to deal, America has had to deal with this conflation, right? And the fight back. And right now, they're dealing with black minority communities fighting back and so on. Now, that sort of sensibility is needed. Now, the people who are going to be paying a huge price in this entire tirade, so to speak, if I can use the word bluntly, would be the majority of Muslims who don't subscribe to violence. That's the majority of Muslims anywhere in the world. Now, what's going to be their lot?
As somebody answers the question, Viswa, can I say this? America has its share of issues as well.
Of course.
For example, burning of the Quran. We won't allow it.
But they apologize for it.
Well, they say
they didn't write on it,
but it's not criminalized, and it is allowed, and it is put within the framework of rubric of freedom of speech. Yeah. And in America, you might almost say the social convention on political correctness perhaps is a bigger restraint. And while there is a lot of talk about freedom of speech, try publishing something that is as offensive as what this magazine has published, but about in an anti-Semitic way or in some other way. And I don't think you will find many takers.
No.
So again, America has drawn its boundaries, and we need to understand that.